Education state funding in Pennsylvania ranks 50th of all states in the country. Not only don't we have enough money, but the money is not given out equitably.
Hi, I'm Andrea Moselle, and I'm a member of Germantown Jewish Center, and I co-chair the education strategy team for the Philadelphia branch of Power.
The expansion of Power Beyond the City was looking at our education justice campaign, which started looking at how struggling Philly schools were, school closures, but also the underfunding of the schools, and folks realized that this was a state problem, that to change this issue, we'd have to look at the state and our legislators in Harrisburg.
We've been on the ground here. We had our first meeting in May. We were stuffed into one of the conference rooms around the corner. We had about 45, 50 folks who came out from this area to hear about the racial bias in education funding here in the state of Pennsylvania.
I think one of the things about organizing is that often it's the work is hard and it's focused on what we don't want. I think our organizing is not only what we don't want, so what we don't want is funding disparity, but what we do want is equitable funding.
Public school funding tends to come from two main sources, from local municipalities raising revenues mostly by property taxes, and from the state providing public school funding to all the districts across the state. Now the local portion of the funding is going to vary tremendously based on how wealthy the community is. So rich communities are going to be able to raise a lot of revenue and put a lot into their public schools, and poorer communities less so. And it's the role of the state to make up some of those differences when it distributes money to the districts.
So if you go to a school that's a good school, you don't even think about it at all. You just assume, money's there and schools are well run and everything's fine. You don't have to go too far, though, to realize that schools, even a mile apart, if they're in different districts, have very different sets of resources and very different investment from the state and from local government.
The state recently, 2 years ago, passed what was called a fair funding formula, something that we supported and pushed and made happen. And that fair funding formula was supposed to put away all of the racial inequities and other inequities in our funding system. However, that formula does not use all of the money that the state has. It only uses 7% of the money that goes through the formula. And so we're still 93% inequitable in our funding. That means cities like Philadelphia receive $400 million less each year for its students. Cities like York and Lancaster and Allentown and Reading and Pottstown receive anywhere from $13 million less to $50 million less of their fair share of school funding. Our research has also shown that when the districts of color are taken into account, that districts of color, predominantly districts of color, get $2,000 less per student.
Racism is inherently a part of the way that we do funding, and so we have been pushing for what we call a full fair funding formula.
I'm the prime sponsor in the House for HB 2501, which is the full, the 100% fair funding for public education bill. And we already have about 18 co-sponsors that includes at least 2 Republicans, so it's a bipartisan bill. And essentially what it does is it takes the recommendations, the unanimous recommendations from the 2015 Basic Education Funding Commission to put 100% of state funds through the fair funding formula instead of just 7%, which is the current default. So if we believe in fair, we believe in just, we believe in quality education for everyone, regardless of what zip code you live in, then why not make it 100%?
The education strategy team works at several different levels. So there is our work at the state level, which is largely focused on addressing the disparity in funding, where school districts, which happen to be mostly Black and brown school districts, are woefully underfunded due to the state's failure to put the state education dollars through the fair funding formula.
Now we're pushing to make sure that all the funding is pushed through that formula, that way we actually get equity in the funding itself.
It's an issue that impacts not only Philadelphia, but impacts school districts across the state. At the local level, we are engaged in work that is aimed at improving the quality of education in Philadelphia public schools. And we have been an active part of Our Cities, Our Schools, which was a coalition that was formed to get rid of the SRC and to return to local control of public schools.
And we're looking at a deficit over the next few years of $600 to $700 million in Philadelphia. We feel that that shouldn't all be on the backs of individual taxpayers in a city that's got such a high poverty rate. And we're looking at both the business community and the large mega nonprofits like the University of Pennsylvania, who currently are tax exempt, and looking at other ways that funding could come into the city schools.
We're also active in a new and evolving coalition called Pay Up PPA, and that is aimed at the Philadelphia Parking Authority, and that is aimed at getting the Philadelphia Parking Authority to be more transparent and accountable, and to increase the level of funding that the Philadelphia Parking Authority sends to Philadelphia public schools. As part of that coalition, we are demanding $25 million. And one of the things I think often people will say, well, you've got this huge school district and there's billions of dollars, what's $25 million? But one of the things for me personally, I'm a grandparent. I currently now have 2 grandsons in Philadelphia public schools, one going to 1st grade and one going to 2nd grade this year. And what I know from my firsthand experience with them as part of their school experience, I'm on the school advisory council for their school, is that every dollar counts. Philadelphia public schools and other public schools in the state and in fact across the nation have been starved. We are not investing at a level that we should in our public education. And so I see on a daily basis the impact of not having adequate resources. You see the lack of supports in classrooms. You see class sizes that are large. You see a revolving door of teachers and administrators in many schools due to the conditions in those schools. And so we know that every dollar counts.
We need to put all of the money into the fair funding formula. And we believe this is a just fight. This is a fight about the very nature and soul of our state. It is a fight for racial justice that some people thought was finished 60 years ago when Brown versus the Board of Education was decided. However, in Pennsylvania, it's simply not the case. And so we're going to continue to push our legislators. We're going to do voter engagement in the next coming months to talk to voters all over the state and engage our elected officials in forums and challenge them to change a system that has to be changed. It is the right thing to do.
My faith compels me to work on issues like education that involve questions of equity, that involve questions of making sure that people have the resources that they need to flourish.
It's not enough that we pray. What is the more that God is asking of us and asking for us to do in the community as we live out this command, which most of our churches say every Sunday, you know, to love God and love neighbor as ourselves. And so we just can't just be comfortable in what we've always done. We've got to think of new ways to do greater things.